Welcome to the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Boom! Boom! Let's get started here. The Steroids Podcast is brought to you by Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, for the first time in bodybuilding history, you have someone with no corporate interests and no obligation to please anyone, not walking on eggshells to not offend. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the information, the whole truth, not a full truth and a half truth, full truth. Ultimate Guide to Roids gives you the keys to the Lamborghini, gives you the information, and lets you decide what to do with it. It's a crime this information has been suppressed this long. Now let's get on with the podcast.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Steroids Podcast with your host, Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. Now, I was traveling the other day because, I've been traveling during this whole pandemic hoax, right? So I've been running away from it, basically. Wherever there's not lockdowns, which, wherever there's not lockdowns, there's basically zero corona. So I've been going to all the countries, with no lockdown and, where I can live life normally, which is great. And obviously no one is sick. No shit. No duh. And so that's been nice. That's been nice. I was flying the other day, and you know what? Those damn guys who they do the thing where they unload your baggage. All right. So I travel with my guitar, my Red Jackson. It's Japanese made from the early the late 80s, early 90s. Pretty sick guitar. Anyways, it's in a hard case and everything, but still they like fucking throw the thing, okay? Because that's how those guys do. And so the electronics got a little bit screwed up last time, and now there's some buzzing coming from the guitar. And so now I was just playing it just before this, and I was like, those bastards! So now I'm going to have to, open her up and do some operating to her insides. Occasionally when you're an electric guitar owner, player, you have to open your guitar up and do a little bit of operations to their insides to get them back in full force. So a little distracted there. Make sure you guys that you go to the I know a lot of you guys listen to this on Apple Podcast. Apple's Podcast and Spotify are the two main platforms where people listen to this podcast. And then the next most popular one is YouTube. But Apple Podcast is way more listeners than anything else. And then Spotify would be second, and then YouTube third. Anyways, it really helps the podcast grow when you guys go to the Apple Podcast app and search, Steroids Podcast, and then give it a 5-star review. And if you can leave a comment too, you don't have to leave a comment, but if you could give a 5-star review, and if you can leave a comment too on it, that's even better. Saying that you enjoy the podcast. And man, this has had a huge effect on the search engine optimization from you guys that did that already. And I just know that there's, thousands of you guys that are listening to this on Apple Podcasts. So there's already, a nice amount in the low hundreds, on there. But, the effect that it had on helping people find this. And it's a really cool way to do it too, because you can leave the rating or the review anonymously. And so then you don't have to admit to all your friends on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, that you use steroids. Because I know that that's one of the main reasons why, you can't, even if you enjoy this podcast a lot, it's you can't share it on social media or something because, it's like a sensitive subject. So if you enjoy the podcast a lot, you're really enjoying it, man, that would help me out unbelievably. If you could just take a second right now to pause the podcast and go over to the Apple Podcast app and give it a 5-star review there. It helps spread the word, We want to help everybody have the right information. We want to say, fuck off to all the bodybuilding lies that have been, screwing us over for all these years. So now that we have a resource here, the Steroids Podcast, an ultimate guide to roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand. So, we want to spread this to as many people as possible. And this is a great anonymous way to do that. So, great, you guys. Great. Go over there. Apple Podcasts app. 5-star review, Steroids Podcast. All right, getting into the first question for the day. Hey, Dan, the bodybuilder from Thailand. Wasting gear and growth hormone in the syringe. This is from Anonymous. That was a strange question, but it's a good question. Okay, so a lot of people will get bothered by this, and me too, especially if it's growth hormone, because when, for example, if you have a nordytropin pen or a genotropin pen, when you take the injection and you take it out of your stomach fat, when you're done with the injection, there'll be a little drop of water, which is growth hormone water, on the tip of the needle, and you'll be like, what the fuck? Because the shit's expensive, so it's like it'll piss you off, because you'll be like, oh, I don't want this, water dripping out. I'm wasting a little bit of it, even if it's just, like a tiny drop, but it'll still bug you, okay? And I just want to let you guys know who have experienced this, because I know a lot of you are wondering, like, is there something wrong that I'm doing wrong? Or is like my pen, not right? Nah, it's normal, man. It's just part of taking it. So that happens to everybody. I've talked with a lot of my other friends, because when I first started using nordytropin pens, I noticed that, and I was pissed, because I was like, oh, I'm losing a little drop each time that I do an injection. And so then I started asking my other friends who used growth hormone pens, other friends who used nordytropin pens, and also other friends that used omnitrope or genotropin pens, and they were telling me the same thing. And when I said something about it, they were like, that's happening to you too. And then they'd be show me how displeased they were about how that always happens to them as well. So that's going to be a normal thing about doing that. It just, there's no way to, not waste that little drop. The only thing that you can do to kind of help it is to kind of like pull your skin out and kind of like aim it vertically. And then have the pen be doing the injection vertically, so that gravity is kind of like pushing on that drop of water. Then kind of like leave it in there for maybe 5 seconds or so, after you finish the injection, and kind of like fiddle with the button on the top. And then, that makes the little bubble that comes out, very, very much smaller, that you have to waste. The other thing would be wasting steroids in your injection syringe, whether you're using a 1 milliliter insulin syringe, which, you guys don't use a needle less than half an inch if you're doing that. A lot of the irritation and problems that people have with their skin from steroid injections comes from using insulin syringes, and not getting it deep enough, because it causes a lot of irritation if steroids get mixed with the fat tissue. So if you're using an insulin syringe, make sure it's at least a half inch long. 1 inch long injection needle is preferable. Also, I just thought I'd throw this in here, is my favorite needle for drawing oil out of ampules or vials is 18 gauge 1.5 inch needle. It's long enough to get really in there, like especially with an ampule, and it's also like big enough, wide enough that you can just pull the gear straight in. You don't have to like wait for it sitting there, waiting for it to pull in and fill up the syringe for like 10 freaking minutes, which is really a pain in the ass. And then the one that I like to use for injections is the 24 gauge or the 25 gauge 1 inch needle. And so, it depends on, how, I guess you could say, lazy I was being. It's not really lazy, but, if you do change the needle between drawing and injecting, that's not going to make a difference for the sterilization. If you put it in the vial, you're injecting whatever, was in the vial. So, that's not going to make a difference if you then change the needle as far as sterilization after it's been in contact with the inside of the vial. But When you put it through the rubber stopper or something, or if you touch it to the glass and the ampule or whatever, that, the microscopic tip of the needle is going to become bent a little bit like a fish hook or so. So then when you put it into you, it's going to give you some pain, less comfortable injection. So, if you open up a new needle and put it on the syringe before you do the injection, it's a lot more comfortable having it razor sharp, and it's never passed through anything. It's never passed through a rubber stopper at the top of a 10 milliliter vial. It's never touched the glass on the side of an ampule. It's fresh out of the package, and the first thing that the tip of the needle touches is your skin. It makes a huge difference in how comfortable doing the injection is, and you feel way less pain if you do it that way. So recommend that. Anyways, wasting steroids in the syringe. Okay, so yeah, this is another thing, is that there's going to be a little bit of steroids that you're going to waste in the syringe. It's going to be, again, a very small amount. Like the tip of a pen, or like the tip of a, if you have one of those pencils, those mechanical pencils, and you have the little tip that comes out to write, that much might get stuck like in the syringe or something, and you're not going to be able to get it out. And so you're going to waste it. And that's going to happen every time. And so people, a lot of times this will be annoying or irritating to people. One of the solutions that people do to help with that is to leave a little, a tiny air bubble in the syringe, like, like the size that I'm talking about when I say tiny air bubble is like 1/10 of a milliliter, okay? Or maybe even less, but just something, very small right at the end to kind of like push the oil through. But even if you do that, some will still get stuck in the syringe. So I know sometimes also people say like, oh shit, they have their injections all planned out and they have like the exact amount of gear that they need. And they're like, oh shit, yeah, I'm not able to get, as many milliliters as I need, because I'm wasting some in the syringe. So this is normal, guys. And you got to plan for that. That, some is going to be wasted, whether it's steroids or whether it's the growth hormone, whatever. There is going to be a little bit wasted in the injection device. And there is no way of completely getting around that. There are these little ways to kind of mitigate it a little bit, but you'll always waste a little bit. And that's just part of taking PEDs, is wasting a little bit. Not fun, but a part of life. All right, the next question is from Gustavo. Huge fan of the pod and the book, Ultimate Guide to Roids. This info is doing the world a massive favor. Today, I injected 250 milligrams testananthate and 200 milligrams trenbolone enanthate into my left ventral glute. The ventral glute is the shoulder of the leg. So if you reach down to your hip bone on your side, like directly on your side, like where your hand rests, and you reach down to your hip bone, 1 inch below that is muscle there. And that's your ventral glute. That's a very good injection site. And he says, within 10 minutes, he got a sharp left knee pain in the joint around his kneecap. It was a shooting pain down into his shin. This is my 4th Tren injection, and this is the first time this has happened. Any thoughts? Yeah. So Trenbolone has a specific stinging or shooting pain reaction when you take an injection. When you take testosterone or pretty much any other steroids for the most part, when you inject it, you'll get a full sensation. So a full sensation like, oh, that took up room inside of my body. That took up room inside of the muscle. It'll kind of feel like pressure, like there's pressing inside the muscle. But Trenbolone has a different feeling when it is injected. It's more of an acidic or burning or stinging, or like he said, shooting feeling. Or a radiating feeling from the injection site, radiating away from it. So basically, as soon as the oil touches your muscle tissue, you stick the needle in, and then you start to, press on the plunger. As soon as that Trenbolone oil comes into contact with your muscle tissue inside of you, it's going to sting. And, it's not going to be stinging so bad that you're like, oh my God, I can't press this. If it's like that, then it's a problem. It's not good gear. But it is going to have a distinct burning sensation, kind of like, almost like, a weak acid, almost like, oh, I'm injecting like a weak acid or something like that. That shit has got so many problems with it. It's strong. It's the best bodybuilding drug, but it's got so many stupid ass problems with it. That's why I'm talking about, like in the book and everything, man, this stuff is side effect city. And then talk about, other ways to kind of like approximate it without doing that. Anyways, that pain that you get, it definitely, like after the injection, as the oil starts to absorb through your body, it can kind of like come into contact with some nerves and everything, the Tren. And then you get these like shooting pains, like Gustavo said, like radiating down your legs or something like that. Like it might be, like he said, down into your shin or like down through your glute or like near your sciatic nerve or something. It's very uncomfortable. So this happens, and it usually stays for about 2 to 3 hours after the injection. And so you'll kind of be walking around like, I've got this nerve pain for 2 or 3 hours after you take the Tren injection. And then it gets, absorbed and dispersed throughout the body, and then you don't feel it anymore. But that's a different from, taking injections of any other steroids. So that's a thing with Tren. You said that it hadn't happened at all until your 4th injection. Well, it happens, So with Tren cough and everything like that too, it's not something that happens every time. It's something, where you might not feel it, 5 times in a row, and then boom, the next time you'll get it or something like that. It's not, none of this stuff is super consistent. But the stinging feeling though on contact with the muscle of the Trenbolone oil is consistent though. So anyways, good question, Gustavo. Next question is from Bruno, who asks, "Sup, Dan? Love the podcast. I have a Equipoise related question. For how long can one run this compound non-stop? I've been on 500 milligrams high-quality Equipoise for 10 weeks, on top of my TRT, with no side effects whatsoever, only solid gains. The increase in red blood cells doesn't seem to be a big issue since I donate blood regularly. Thanks for putting the truth out there. Best regards from Brazil." Oh, in Brazil, they have really good high-quality vet Equipoise. I'm sure that's what he's using. They have the actual brand name vet Equipoise by Pfizer called Equipoise. That's the brand name. And they have another kind too. I think the brand is Quality Vet, but I'm not sure. They have 2 different brands that are veterinary brand Equipoise that, yes, are very high quality, like he was saying. So, people talk about that, the red blood cell increase on Equipoise. Equipoise increases your red blood cell count. That's kind of funny. It does. It does increase your red blood cell count. That's true. But so does testosterone. And testosterone does it very potently. And then so does Anadrol. I mean, one of the reasons why Anadrol is prescribed in the U.S. and, can currently even be prescribed in the U.S. is for anemia, so low red blood cell count. So I'm going to tell you right now that all male hormones significantly increase your red blood cell count. That's one of the things they do, increasing the amount of oxygen in your blood by doing that, increasing the amount of oxygen that is available in your bloodstream for your muscles to use. It's logical. But that, again, that's one of the central components of using anabolic steroids is that they increase your red blood cell count. I'm not sure why Equipoise got this, there's like this internet myth that it has some kind of supernatural powers for increasing your red blood cell count and that other steroids don't, like it's specifically an Equipoise thing. That's definitely not true. It's like Equipoise does it, yeah, but, it doesn't do it in some kind of crazy, more potent way than the other steroids. They all do it. I'm not sure, why that myth got started. There's so many weird myths about the steroids that just got started on the internet and then just got repeated over and over and over again. And, once something's been repeated so many times over and over again, people just think like, oh, it's true. But, in this case, that's not the way it is. It's just like anything else. You said, how long can you stay on Equipoise? So this is a really good question, because picking one of these injectable steroids as an addition to testosterone and making it what you rely on is really important in your long-term bodybuilding goals. So there's not that many injectables, right? And there's not even that many different types of steroids. So there's not so many choices. But basically, in order to be using steroids for a long time and doing it as healthy as possible, you got to use testosterone. That's got to be one of the ones that you're relying on. And then you got to pick another injectable that you can rely on to supplement with. Because all of the orals, you guys, are more toxic than all of the injectables. And that goes for Tren too. You can use Tren for quite a long time. Are the side effects of Tren not fun? Yes, but in comparison to the toxicity effects of orals, Tren is less toxic to your health than orals. And you can run it for far, far longer without feeling the effects of, whoa, this is taking a toll on me, and, I need to take a break so that I'm not so tired or something like that anymore. So, you got to pick testosterone, and then you got a choice. You got Deca, you got Equipoise, you got Primobolan, you got Trenbolone, you got Masteron, and some guys have access to one testosterone or dihydroboldenone too, so that works. And basically, you've got to choose, one of those to pair with your testosterone and rely on it. You've got to go through and see which one really agrees with your body. Like Bruno was saying in his question, he has no side effects from Equipoise whatsoever, only solid gains. So, he's doing it right. He's figured out, testosterone and Equipoise are the steroids that he uses as his base. That's his main bodybuilding chemicals. He's able to do this for long term. And yeah, generally bioidentical hormones. So, testosterone and human growth hormone, those are the two most healthy bodybuilding chemicals. And then you have, unnatural injectables like the ones that we mentioned, Deca, Masteron, Primobolan, Trenbolone, Equipoise, 1-testosterone. And those are the second tier. And then you have oral steroids, which are, the third tier, where, it's definitely similar to like smoking cigarettes, on your cardiovascular system to be taking oral steroids. So it's like, are you going to get cancer or a heart attack, from smoking cigarettes for a month, or 2 months? No. But if you're doing it for 10 years straight, you're definitely increasing your chances of, cardiovascular disease, because of, what they do to your, it's cumulative damage that adds up. So that's how that goes. You got to choose, what kind of health risk you're going to be taking in your life. Some people choose to take steroids and have a clean diet and exercise. Other people decide to eat a bunch of crap, drink alcohol, not exercise, and, not take steroids. And so, they're not any healthier. So you've got to choose, but don't do this thing with the steroids, where you're acting like a little child, where you're like, okay, I'm going to use the steroids to like cheat the system. And, I'm going to do all this partying and eating all this bad food and then taking the steroids. Like that's how you're going to get fucked up. So you need to be an adult about this. About taking your steroids. Be an adult. Don't be like a little kid, trying to eat candy and treats all day. You're going to take steroids, take some responsibility and mitigate some of the other risks. Eat healthy whole food. All right. So you can take, Equipoise for, it's up to you, bro. But if it was me, it wouldn't make me feel uncomfortable to use it in 16 to 20 week intervals. you should check your blood work while you're on cycle and see what it looks like. For me, I can take 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and on cycle have perfect blood work, except for my red blood cell count being too high. And so then, I have to get rid of some blood to make, the density of my blood cells that are within my blood volume go down. But other than that, 1,000 milligrams of testosterone doesn't make my blood work bad. So it's not, increasing, it's not causing me cardiovascular damage to my liver and kidneys, etc. Yeah, I mean, that's it. So you should, if you like running Equipoise, or you guys that, you're trying to figure out what is the steroid, that I'm going to rely on that works good for me, that gives me low side effects, that I'm going to rely on in addition to testosterone to do my bodybuilding and do my gains. Which one, you got to figure that out. And then, once you're on it and you've been using it for a while, you should get a blood check, a general blood check, and see what it does to you. And then, make a decision, like, how much do I want to run this stuff? For Bruno, it's Equipoise. For me, it's Primobolan. And it can just be even better for your health is just testosterone and growth hormone. So that's it, but testosterone, growth hormone, Primobolan, that's a good one for me. For Bruno, testosterone, Equipoise, and then, eventually at some point, if he wants to, growth hormone, that would be good for him. And you can definitely be a full-on, all-out bodybuilder on that stuff. And then if you want to use, other stuff too, you can use that, throwing it in and out from time to time. And, when you do that, you just know that, hey, I'm doing something unhealthy right now, so I don't want to do it, all the time. I just want to do, that every once in a while. Like, some people party every once in a while. Some people eat junk food every once in a while, or don't exercise every once in a while, etc. You got to pick your battles, pick your risks. Okay. The next question is from Nick. Question for the podcast. What's your thoughts on injectable clenbuterol? Seems all the rage here in Australia at the moment, though I don't know if anyone who actually injects it. Most just take it orally. Any benefits like localized fat loss with injecting it subcutaneously? No. It's very orally available. It absorbs like more than 90% microgram per microgram, because that's how it's measured into the through the mouth. So you don't need to inject it. I can see the appeal, because somebody would say like, oh, there's some spot fat loss reduction, and it will be active if you inject it. I mean, it will be bioavailable, just like it is if you take it through your mouth. But the reason how clenbuterol works is there's these receptors they're related to adrenaline response, okay? And they're called adrenergic receptors. And when adrenergic receptors get stimulated, that causes fat cells to put out their lipids, their stored fats into the bloodstream, okay, for energy purposes. And so that's how clenbuterol works. And so it's more of a systemic thing than a localized thing. And the main function that clenbuterol has is it stimulates your body to release more adrenaline, and it does this around the clock. And then that adrenaline, it attaches to its receptor on the fat cells and causes them to put energy into the bloodstream. And you've got higher adrenaline all the time. You've got higher amounts of fatty acids, lipids in your bloodstream all the time, and you burn more fat. Just injecting it, that seems like something that would be like somebody who really likes to do injections. They're just obsessed with injecting everything. That's the same thing with injecting the SARMs. It's like, what the hell? These things are like 95% oral bioavailability, so you're getting 5% more. You could have just taken 1 extra milligram through your mouth and you would have got the same effect. That's like people who they're obsessed with needles and syringes and love doing injections. So I don't see any reason Or maybe they're trying to like be badasses or shocking or something like that with needles, you know, because there are so many weird people out there. All right, next question. Alex says, I'm on a cycle of test enanthate 125 with higher dosage Primobolan and Masteron. Before I was running higher dosage testosterone propionate with the Primobolan, but then swapped out the milligrams of testosterone and replaced it with the same milligrams of Masteron, and now my strength gains have stopped. How can I tweak my cycle to get strength gains without much weight gain and no fat gain? All right. So let's say he was running 700 milligrams of testosterone and 700 milligrams of Primobolan. And then he says that he put in Masteron and then dropped his, testosterone to about 100 milligrams per week. And now he's on 600 Masteron instead. And he noticed, his performance went down. This is not surprising. It's not surprising because testosterone brings stuff into the body. It brings sodium, it brings carbohydrates, it brings all the stuff that your body needs to do performance and to have fuel storage in your muscles. It brings it all into the body. And Masteron kind of does the opposite, like Masteron has a more densifying, sucking down effect. It definitely does not make your muscles bigger at all. So Primobolan, on the other hand, does give your muscles a certain shape and like a roundness and kind of like pump your muscles up a bit. It gives you like that kind of an effect. But Masteron does not do that. Masteron it doesn't make you any bigger at all. It probably, you could say it makes you a little bit smaller to be on Masteron. It's more of a sleek, lean, athletic look rather than a big, strong, big, monster type of look. It's definitely not that at all. It's a pretty interesting steroid like that. And so I've experimented with Masteron too. I remember one time I was on Masteron and Winstrol, and I let my testosterone go out of my body. I stopped taking testosterone, but I was on Masteron, Winstrol, and Proviron. And, people then started saying that I got big because I had been on, a regular steroid cycle. They were like, hey, Dan, it's funny what's been going on with your body. You were real big for a while, you blew up, and now you're back small again. And then, once I got back on a normal cycle, put the test back in, they were like, and now you're big again. And I think they were like, teasing or something like you're on steroids because I wasn't talking with them about like, I'm on steroids. And it was when I was pretty new to steroids, So that was funny, though, that people thought that I had gone off cycle because I had stopped taking testosterone and instead been taking, Masteron. It was Masteron, Winstrol, and Proviron. And to them, it looked like I wasn't even on steroids anymore. And I remember that there was a huge decrease in my performance too, like in my energy and the amount of strength that I had, the amount of sets that I could do without needing to reduce the weight, etc. in the gym. It was like that. So when you take out testosterone is very powerful, you guys. And like I've mentioned in the podcast previously, when you take testosterone, all of your other steroids then work better. And the more testosterone you take, the less of other steroids you need in order to get their characteristic effects out of them. So, for example, somebody that is taking 100 milligrams of testosterone and 300 milligrams of Trenbolone, they're going to have to, in comparison to somebody who's taking 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and 300 milligrams of Trenbolone, that 300 milligrams of Trenbolone is going to be much more potent and, having the profound effects of Trenbolone. And the guy is going to be experiencing, characteristic or stereotypical Trenbolone effects more when he's also on 1,000 milligrams of testosterone. If he's, only on 100 milligrams of testosterone, he would have to like bump up the Tren dosage a lot in order to be getting those. I mean, he'll still be getting them. Don't get me wrong. He'll still be getting Tren effects at 300 milligrams per week. Okay. But if he wanted to be getting, like really powerful, like in your face Tren effects, he wouldn't be getting those as much as, those characteristic effects, those stereotypical effects. So What I'm trying to say is that the more testosterone you take, the stronger all of your other steroids are, and the less of them that you need in order to get their stereotypical effects. So if you are taking Masteron and Primobolan at high dosages, but you're not taking much testosterone, then the Primobolan and the Masteron are going to be way less effective than if you upped the dosage of the testosterone. Then you're going to notice way more of the Masteron and Primobolan effects, the stereotypical effects of those two steroids. Otherwise you're going to, remember that thing where Rich Piana was like, oh, I went off of everything and I just tried Primobolan alone at 1,000 milligrams per week to see, if it lived up to its reputation and that it was all the rage that people say it was. And he said, it was weak. Well, yeah, man, you went off your test. Like that's the way it's going to be. That's definitely the way it's going to be when you do that. If you took the 1,000 milligrams of Primobolan with 1,000 milligrams of testosterone, now all of a sudden you're going to get the effects that Primobolan is known for and that are stereotypical for Primobolan. But that's not happening unless you do that. So that's a good example for all the steroids. If you want to be on Anavar, for example, which Anavar is a really popular one with people who aren't very experienced with steroids, but then most people that get really experienced with steroids kind of forget about Anavar. But, and you're wondering, I'm taking an Anavar only cycle, and it's not working very good, and you're not getting the characteristic effects that you thought you would get with Anavar. The moment that you throw in some testosterone in there, all of a sudden, now the Anavar will come alive, and now you'll start noticing, those characteristic, stereotypical effects of, oh yeah, this is what Anavar is supposed to be like. Very interesting. Okay. Next question, V's asks, does marijuana lower test levels, and also does THC give you gyno? All right. Marijuana reduces DHT conversion, so the conversion of the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, that it reduces that converts testosterone, the muscle building hormone, into dihydrotestosterone, which is the sex hormone, the hormone that makes you a man, makes you have beard growth, makes you have sex drive, etc. But it's a very and it's also an androgen receptor blocker, but it's very weak at these things, you guys. So don't get bent out of shape and I smoke weed and so now my steroids aren't going to work, because that's not the way it is. Okay, the steroids definitely still work with the weed. But if you are smoking around the clock, like you're always stoned 24 hours a day, they won't work as good, okay? And you'll notice it. You'll notice it too. You'll notice, when I was only smoking, once a day, I came home from work and I smoked at night, my steroids definitely worked better than when, was smoking 24 hours a day. It's undeniable. It's undeniable when you've done both. So, hey, marijuana can be great stuff, but I definitely think that it should be used, sparingly, like any other kind of consciousness altering thing. So, when you drink coffee all day, every day, it loses its magic. When you smoke marijuana all day, every day, it loses its magic. If you drink alcohol all day, every day, it loses its magic. All these things, anything that alters your consciousness at all, if you're using them, a maximum of one time per day, that's always the best way to do it, to get the best effects and have the, magic of using them in there. And as far as, the specifically, THC, it's a very, and marijuana, it's a very weak androgen receptor blocker. So if you're absolutely loading your body with marijuana and THC on a, around the clock basis, yes, your steroids will work a little bit not as good, but they will still definitely work. And for naturals, yes, THC can give them gyno. Why? This is because it blocks the conversion of, it reduces that enzyme 5-alpha reductase that transforms testosterone into the sex hormone, dihydrotestosterone. So you'll notice that if you don't have testosterone in your cycle, and then all of a sudden you do add some testosterone, your body will actually get harder, which people think, huh, what? I didn't know that testosterone would make me harder. Even if you're taking something, something like Winstrol or something like that typically is known for making you harder. You'll think like, oh, I thought testosterone would just add water. Well, it actually adds a hardness because that dihydrotestosterone is such a potent hardener. Any dihydrotestosterone compounds are very potent hardeners. And so dihydrotestosterone is as potent in its masculinizing effects as Trenbolone does. So you get a very profound hardening effect from adding a little bit of testosterone into any cycle versus not having any in there. And so that very strong androgen, dihydrotestosterone, competes with estrogen at receptor sites, okay? And it can block estrogen from attaching to estrogen receptors. So if a guy has low dihydrotestosterone, then he's not going to have the hormone dihydrotestosterone competing in his nipple and blocking estrogen receptor sites at his nipple. And so, if he's in puberty, he's got a lot of hormones, especially. It's usually, guys that were smoking weed in puberty, not guys later. But, some guys do have some marijuana-induced gyno later in life. Then they can, have but it's mainly the puberty guys that are in puberty, smoking a lot of weed. And, so they're getting less dihydrotestosterone conversion out of their testosterone production. And, then they have an estrogen receptor that doesn't have any dihydrotestosterone really blocking it in their nipple, and so then the estrogen is free to get in there, block and bind to the estrogen receptor in their nipple, and they get some gyno. So that's, if you're wondering, how come these guys that smoke a lot of marijuana, cannabis, have gyno, and it's usually these guys that are doing it when they're teenagers in puberty. I smoked a lot of weed when I was a teenager, and I got gyno from it. That's the reason why it's doing that. There's an article too, the website for this podcast is called steroidspodcast.com. And, with all this censorship, all these things are getting deleted. It's what I've said since the very beginning. I know how the internet works, guys. I've been working online for a long time. You've got to go to the Steroids Podcast website and sign up for the VIP email list. Okay. So that I have your email, and so that, when I eventually get deleted from social media again, like I already have, had my, big YouTube channel get deleted years ago. I'll still be able to contact you. You won't say, where does he go? I can't find him. He was deleted off all these platforms. Well, I'll be able to email you and say, hey, bro, I got deleted. So, here's where you can find the podcast now. So you got to go to the website. Okay. But on the other website, my bodybuilderinthailand.com website, on the second article on the home page, there's an article called How to Shrink and Get Rid of Gyno. And it will give you, if you're one of these guys that has pubertal gyno or something like that, or steroid-induced gyno, it will give you step-by-step protocol that you can use to shrink that, how to do that, how to take care of your gyno, at least the best that it can. If you don't have extreme gyno, you can definitely get it to an unnoticeable level. But if you do have something like a golf ball under your nipple, then you're gonna have to have surgery if you want it to be completely gone. But for anybody else, if it's just mild at all, you can definitely get it way shrink down. Okay, on to the next question. Nelson asks, he says, while on synthetic testosterone, the man's sperm production is down. Does that make them totally infertile until they take HCG? This is a really good question. A lot of guys think they're, sterile and have no ability to impregnate a woman while they're on steroids. And while your fertility is impaired and you have less fertility, you still do have some fertility. And there are plenty of guys who have been on cycle and gotten girls pregnant, okay? So don't think that it's some kind of like foolproof birth control. And since you're on steroids, you can't get girls pregnant. You definitely can. And guys do, okay? So something like being on steroids and the pull-out method, that works really well. um, but not pulling out. Okay, if you're doing that, that's stupid. If you're not pulling out and you're on steroids, okay, and because you are definitely not 0% fertile. The actual testosterone it interacts with the Leydig cells in your testicles and makes them produce a bit of sperm. So the actual testosterone that you're injecting actually has effects inside your testicles and makes them produce a bit of sperm. You're not 100% infertile. You do have some fertility, but it's highly reduced. Okay, but just don't use it as a method of birth control. And now you're gonna think like, oh, I can't get a girl pregnant, because you definitely can. All right, and the next question is going to be from Carrie. He says, hello, Dan. On cycle, feeling good, but testicles are shut down. Another fertility question. Can get erection, but can't finish. Cycle is 10 milligrams Dbol, 40 milligrams Winstrol. Can I take Clomid to get it back during cycle, or could I up the Dbol milligrams? Thanks for the help. Dbol can give some sexual side effects, okay? So Dbol has a very potent form of estrogen that it forms called methyl estradiol instead of normal estradiol. And so this is like an extra potent form of estrogen, and it can be upsetting to your sexual performance or sexual drive, etc. Mostly having to do with erection. So you say you can get an erection, okay, yeah. But a lot of times, some people will get some sexual dysfunction on Dbol where like the erection won't last very long or something like that. Other people have crazy sex drive on Dbol. It's very individual, but it's not just something where like, you take steroids and you have this crazy sex drive, you got to balance a lot of shit out to make that all work. Messing around with your hormones, it fucks up with your sex drive, unless you got a really big understanding, or, you read Ultimate Guide to Roids, 109-page ebook by Dan the Bodybuilder from Thailand, so that you're able to troubleshoot your side effects, Troubleshoot your side effects, having everything in one place in 109 pages, so that you're able to know what each hormone is doing and know the answers to get rid of your side effects. All the information that you need, that you absolutely need, and nothing else, so that it's, not too confusing like the podcast where you have 40 hours of shit to sift through. You could increase your Dbol to 20 milligrams to go with the 40 milligrams of Winstrol and see if that helps. But what I really think it is I think that your body probably just doesn't agree with the methyl estrogen, and it probably wants some testosterone in there. If Clomid's not going to help, you're going to feel like shit if you take Clomid. That's what Clomid does. It makes you feel like shit. And let me tell you why. The way that Clomid works is it goes into your brain, and at your hypothalamus, it stimulates estrogen receptors. Your hypothalamus, part of your brain, other parts of your brain too, see it as estrogen. It thinks it's estrogen and has its estrogen receptors get lit up. And these, the ones that it stimulates like that, cause your body to start releasing gonadotrophin-releasing hormone, which then travels down to your pituitary gland, which then releases luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, which then transfers down to your testicles and makes them start producing sperm and testosterone. So that's how Clomid works, by specifically stimulating estrogen receptors in your brain. And that's why when you go on Clomid, you feel like dog shit, and everyone that uses it hates it. And guys who have it like prescribed to them for hypogonadism are like, fuck, I don't want to take this, I don't even like take it, even though I'm prescribed it. I'd just rather have low testosterone. That stuff makes you feel terrible and totally out of control of your emotions. So I recommend not taking that. If you want to, if you're not going to inject testosterone, why don't you just get some HCG, so that you're producing your own testosterone again. Then you'd have your testosterone, you'd have the Dbol in there and the Winstrol. Like I said, you can, experiment with going up to 20 milligrams of Dbol and seeing if that makes fix. But I think your body's pretty much saying, it wants testosterone, or another thing is you might have your estrogen might be a little high or something like that, or you might not like, your body might have a rejection of methyl estradiol from Dbol and doesn't want that in there, or else you have some mild sexual dysfunction. So it's all about troubleshooting this stuff and playing around with it. That's why I talk about troubleshooting side effects in the book. All the different compounds have all their different little things that you got to troubleshoot to get around and make them work right. All right, so that was the last question for today, guys. Make sure that you go to the Apple Podcasts app and leave a 5-star review for the Steroids podcast.
If you would like your questions to be answered on the Steroids podcast, go to steroidspodcast.com and leave a comment with your questions, or email or private message steroidspodcast@gmail.com or steroidspodcast on Instagram. Until next time.